Awesome, Brandy. Thank you so much for coming on today's show. I'm very excited for this. I feel like this topic about leadership is more prevalent than ever, especially as there's a lot of things changing and evolving from technology and just overall like what people want in life. So I want to say thank you so much for coming on, and I look forward to this conversation today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, leadership is important to a lot of people. Before we get started, I want to see if we can define this concept of leadership. What does that mean? So we can give context throughout the episode.
I love this question because this is so much of the work that I do with my clients is defining it because it is somewhat, I mean, there are some definite leadership tenets, but it is very subjective. And I'll give you kind of an example of this. So early in my career, I worked for a mortgage lending company, and we never talked about like, oh, what does great leadership mean? But we knew from how we all showed up and how we all behaved that it meant you have a sense of urgency, you're creative, you're innovative, you work. Later in my career, I went to work for a public school district, and that school district defined leadership in a very, very different way. They described it as, and again, this is not anything that anybody talked about, but you could see it in how we all behaved. It was defined more around how do you relationship build, and how do you navigate the bureaucracy, and how do you build consensus and things like that. So I really think that is a great question, and I think it's one that individuals have to answer first and foremost for themselves. Then that answer also needs to come from the company, the organization, right? So if we're talking about leadership development, what exactly are we developing to?
Mhm.
So all of that said, some of the sort of universal components include things like you got to be aware, you got to be self, you got to know how you show up and how you're affecting people. I think to be an effective leader, you also have to have a we mindset.
Mhm.
We work with a lot of people who are new to leadership or not super seasoned, and that's one of the biggest transitions is like, well, I was a really great individual contributor and I'm just going to work on my task list and everything's going to be great, but now all of a sudden there's this responsibility of developing others and communicating effectively with other people outside yourself and thinking more broadly about team and organizational goals as opposed to what's my own personal agenda.
Got you. It's interesting. I remember someone telling me it's like if you want to be a leader, you have to be willing to be led. And I feel like some people may see that as a like I don't say a double-edged sword, but it's like how does that make sense if I'm the one leading? How can I then be led? And it's like there's this collaborative effort that you're kind of mentioning and referring to as well that I think people don't understand. So it's like, hey, if I'm going to do this thing, I do need input, which that input comes from the other people I'm helping to serve ultimately to then like shepherd the way through. Is that what I'm understanding? I guess to a degree.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think is coming more into the conversation in the coaching consulting space right now is this idea of being coachable, and we don't talk about that a lot from a leadership perspective, right? We teach leaders. Here's how you give feedback. Here's how you coach. Here's your schedule. But we don't necessarily talk about like, oh yeah, and by the way, you've got to be open to feedback as well. One of the things I see a lot with new leaders, and I call it guns ablaze. So it's this idea that, okay, cool, I got the promotion, so I must know what I'm doing. So I'm gonna take that and I'm gonna force that on my team. And meanwhile, the team's like, whoa, 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 hold on, let's pump the brakes. So that's where things like going on a listening tour,
Mhm.
asking for that feedback and soliciting it, and that collaborative piece is so important because that old school idea of, just get behind me, just get in line,
Yeah.
that doesn't work, right? We have to be able to collaborate, and that's how you get the best performance anyway.
No, that's so true. I remember being in certain situations where I was overseeing like a fitness, like I was a fitness director. So I
Mhm.
came in to basically rebuild this organization and like this whole vicinity. And when I got in, I was just like, hey, I just want to take the first week to understand where things are, who people are, what's been working, what's not been working. So versus some people, they'll come in, it's like they're off the back reconstructing everything without even understanding the situation. And for me, for kind of what I'm hearing, it's like some people think leadership is like dictatorship. And it's like, no, 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 no. When you're a leader, you're doing more of the serving than the people who are helping to serve you, or to a degree. My question is like, Is there times and roles where that leadership does need to be quote unquote like dictatorship, where it's like, no, 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 I'm strong holding this situation, but of course, still going back to the collaborative effort and working together. I feel like it's probably like a give and take, or not give and take, but a time and a place where, hey, we're doing more of like this is happening, doesn't
Mhm.
matter, versus hey, I need support. Let me understand.
I think you're hitting on one of the hardest parts of being a middle manager,
Mm.
which is there are times when the senior leadership team has said, this is our strategic direction, this is our initiative that we're rolling out. You need to go and introduce that to your team. And this is not a consensus. We're not.
Correct.
So that does happen. I think the opportunity though for that leader, for that middle manager is to say to the team, okay, if this is the direction that we're going in and we know what this directive is, how do we work together? How do we leverage the strengths of everyone? Or what's the best way for us to achieve that? So I still think there's that opportunity for collaboration. But sometimes we're told what that path is going to be.
Correct. No, that's so true. And I think respectfully, if it's coming from a person who has earned the opportunity to be in this position, there's some validity to it. So it's like, hey, it's okay to know that you're being guided by someone who is accredited to do so. But of course, people are people. And then like nobody ever just wants to be told what to do, but some people don't mind being led if given the opportunity to, then be led. I want to do some fire rapper questions for you real quick to bust some myths to get this conversation started. So, and then I would love to understand more of your story of like how did you get to this place, and what kind of inspired you to go down this road. So, we're going to be busting some myths. Is it a myth? Is it a reality? We're going to be talking about specifically leadership. So, give me some fact or fiction, and if there's some that you feel like you might want to explain a little bit more, that's perfect too. So, leaders are born; they're not made.
I don't believe that to be a fact. I don't believe that there's a singular formula for great leadership. I believe it is something that can be, I mean, yes, some of us definitely have some inherent qualities that kind of fall under that leadership umbrella, but I definitely believe it's something that we can learn and grow into.
Okay, awesome. High performers are always great leaders.
No.
That was a personal. That you had a flashback for a moment.
I do a lot of work in this space, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes and more I'm actually seeing employers and companies that have a track, like a technical track, so people can continue to grow and not move into that people leadership space. So not everybody even wants to be a leader or wants to be a people manager. Some people are like, no, I'm cool doing my technical stuff. So yeah, and I think that's part of where we fall down, right, is we expect, okay, so like sales, for example, you're a great salesperson, we're going to put you into a sales management position. It's not the same work. So we're not setting people up for success.
That is so true. I've been put in that situation. I've known people that also have been put in that situation. And it's interesting, guys. I see, and maybe it's a generational thing. I'm not quite sure, but I feel like there is a shift, and we're going to talk about that as well too. Where it's like, do people now even want to be in that leadership kind of role? Because now people are like, no, 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 I don't want to take on the more responsibility and the task, and it's not in the fact of the compensation, but it's more of like the life that they get to now live, which is people. It's like the hidden written text people don't tell you about when you sign on. I've definitely been in that position, but I'm also the type of person like if I join in something, I want to be in a leadership role, like and take it on. Versus some people, they're okay with being the technician, they don't have the skill set or personality to then be led, regardless of them being or coached on it. It's just still not something that they necessarily want to do. But that's definitely something I want to dive in a little bit later. Leadership development is just another HR initiative.
No. So I work with a lot of HR people. Like those are my people. We
Okay.
partner all the time with HR leaders. And it's like saying culture is the responsibility
Mm,
of HR. It's not. It really belongs to the entire organization, right? Because what is
yeah.
the purpose of leadership development? Purpose of leadership development is to set people up for success so the company can continue to seamlessly thrive, right? And so if that's the goal, why would that only be an HR function?
That's correct.
I think it even comes down to, I mean, it starts with that frontline manager. they have
Mhm.
a responsibility through modeling their behavior, through coaching and supporting their team members, even at that level, to start developing leaders. So the other, I know you said rapid fire. I'm sorry. I'm just,
Oh, you're good. I love it.
but the other thing too is that sometimes we think about leadership development as like everybody goes to a conference or everybody gets in a classroom. I mean, yes, that can be part of it, but it's also sort of that day-to-day stuff. How are leaders showing up? How are they supporting their teams? What are they modeling and what is the culture supporting?
I like that. Um, there's a comment I want to make on that, but it's tied to it. So another question I'm gonna ask later is, people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad leaders.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think the data shows, the Gallup data shows that 70% of employee engagement is directly tied to that person's relationship with their manager. So if you're my boss and we don't have a good relationship, it could be the best job in the world, and I'm gonna find something else.
But Brandy, I'm paying you a lot of money and a lot of opportunity. You get a bunch of PTO. Why are you wanting to leave? What is going
Yeah.
on?
So it's yeah, and that's the easy stuff, right? Like, let's throw money at it. Let's throw vacation time at it. That stuff is easy. It's that relationship building. I mean, and if you think about the very best boss that you've ever had, you might say something like, "Oh, I'd lay down on the train tracks for that
Yeah.
person." I'm coming to work every day because I love my work and I know I'm appreciated. I have this great relationship. We can work together effectively and collaboratively versus I don't want to come in because I don't know what kind of mood Jay's in, or he's gonna yell at me, or he's not gonna communicate with me. So I think that relationship is huge.
That's so true. And it's funny, I have a conversation with one of my friends and he's currently going through that process right now. If, he's been giving a lot of opportunity from the commercial side because he's a big in the government, a lot like almost double. But he's like, the path and the people I work with right now that have my back and support that could be the long-term play is so much more. It was worth more the value than the monetary gain of this current opportunity. And I think people don't understand that value because it's like you always want people that's going to be in your corner, who's going to help you through the long term, not just the short term. That doesn't
Absolutely.
mean you can't make short term plays that can be beneficial to them when you have the opportunity to be in that long term. But that is so true. And I've personally left opportunities because of that situation. Now, leadership coaching is a waste of money if someone isn't naturally skilled in it.
So this goes back to the coachability thing, right? If someone is like, "Hey, look, I wanted to do a good job by my team. I want to be effective. I just need help to get there." I'm willing to see the blind spots. I'm willing to do that hard personal work because that's really where it starts. I
Yeah.
think if someone comes to the table with that, then I think that can be accomplished.
I think the interesting part about this, there's a saying I try to live by that somebody told me. They're like, are you capable? Are you able? Are you willing? And if you're able to answer all three of those, the last thing is, are you committed to then like seeing it through?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like these people, it's like, hey, are you capable of leading a team? You don't know. Maybe you need the skill sets to acquire it. Well, are you able to then like acquire these skill sets? Sure. Are you willing to seek guidance, but also be willing to humble yourself to
Yeah.
then be led? If so, cool. The last thing is like, are you committed to actually finding this out and
Yeah.
sticking through it to the end? And if you're not, then like we got to maybe address some of these factors, and then that's okay if you aren't. There's no shame in it. And I think that's where some people, and you can correct me, people that get into these opportunities or they're presented these opportunities of leadership, they feel like they probably can't say no because their boss or this person is like wanting them to jump in this role versus them saying like, hey, respectfully, I don't, not that I don't think I couldn't do it, I honestly just don't want to do it. Or vice versa, and that's being okay. But I feel like then the leader who then presented the opportunity is like, okay, why doesn't this person feel like they can rise to the occasion? Is there something wrong with them? Should I need a different person in this particular role because they're not going to ascend up? Versus like, hey, no, that's okay. You can stay here. I'll just get another person then fulfill this particular role. Do you see that misgap happen a lot? And leaders are now questioning their team of who they have on their team.
So I'll give you a really good example of this, and this is something that actually I'm working on now. So a couple of people were promoted from individual contributor to sort of frontline management roles,
Mhm.
and what happened was the expectation of what that meant wasn't clear. So
Mm,
they were so excited about, I get this cool title, I get this raise, like I get to do, and there was a sort of misperception of, these people in this position don't do the hard work because
yeah.
they didn't see all the like administrative things that go along with that and all the people management stuff that go along with it. So here we are 6 months later, and one of these individuals is really having a hard time. And even though the expectations have, that conversation's been had several times, what you said about commitment, that piece is lacking. The self awareness piece is lacking. So here we are 6 months down the road. The company has invested all kinds of coaching and training and time and effort with this individual. And the ultimate, what it's looking like is this person's going to have to step back into the contributor role. So 6 months of wasted time, energy, and money, in part because those expectations weren't clear, and in part because there was a lack of self-awareness and self-honesty from the person who got promoted.
Mm. So, do you feel like maybe in that situation, I mean, there's definitely sounds like there's a lot of clarity that's needed, but sometimes people just don't know what they don't know.
Yes.
and and it's like no one is safe from that, and that's okay. Is there moments do you feel, or maybe there's a structure or a equation even, and I would definitely want to get into like the Pathfinder strategies for sure. Do you feel like there is like an equation for people to answer to go through before then deciding to get people into a leadership role, and then people who might want to find a leadership role go through a certain series of questions or audit of themselves to then answer that for themselves?
That's a great question. So I have many things to say. We actually have a leadership self-assessment, and it's a series of like 16 questions, and we tell people like just be honest, right? Like there's no right or wrong answers, and it's very telling in terms of, because it's meant to address some of those things that we don't see.
Mm,
So that's a piece of it. I think the other thing that people who are in leadership or want to be in leadership can really do proactively is seek out those opportunities to like act up. So when someone's out on vacation, can I fill in their role? Can I participate in this committee? What are those things I can do to get that exposure? Can I shadow, if you're my manager, Jay, can I shadow you
mhm.
for a few days? Can I go with you to these never-ending meetings that you have and sort of see what's involved in that, to see that it's not all, super sexy, and it's not all like it's hard work. It's very rewarding, but it's hard work. And the other piece is there has to be more ongoing proactive discussion around what that expectation is for leaders, because like that conversation just doesn't get had. So I'm
Yeah,
going to promote you because you're a great individual contributor, and we work together, I'm your manager, you see what I do, so but you don't. And so we never have that conversation. And so we're not operating from a place of clarity out of the gate.
that's I love that so much. It's interesting because I'm big in sales in the sense of like most of my career skill set level has been in sales. And it reminded me when I went into an opportunity, they're like, "Hey, we're putting you through a test run just so you can see what this is like, see if you're willing to commit to this." Because like I can tell you, hey, you got to hit a certain amount of downtime and do X, Y, Z, but we're going to test run you first for like a week or two, not just to see if you're capable, but are you willing to then actually meet to the task? And that's okay if you're not. And I think that was one of the best things that particular company did, because if you got past this point, not to say that you hit the KPIs, but you were just willing to put in the work, regardless of what outcome, we can then work with that and then move you to the next phase, because now you understand what it takes, what we're willing to work on as well. And that was one of the best things personally from the sales side that I've gone through. I was like, this is great. I love this kind of culture because it just makes sense. There's no lose-lose situation where it's like, hey, you don't feel like you're being punished because maybe this isn't something that you want to do or
Right.
that you can't meet to the task. And then we don't lose out on wasting time onboarding you, going through the process. And that's pretty great. I do love that. And you mentioned something before, which reminded me of a conversation I had with my mother, funny enough, where these people who look at leaders and they're like, oh, they don't really do much. It's like, no, 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 no. like they do a lot more than you know, but they're also just doing things at a different level than you have the ability to do so. And I say that because I remember having a conversation with my mom at a time that I was going through some interesting turmoil in my own personal relationship with like a partner.
Yeah.
And she was just like, "Hey, I'm sorry I didn't, let you in on the not necessarily bad side, but the sides I didn't want you to see between me and your father. So
Okay.
now you have this pictured idea of like what a relationship is. It's like, no, no, no. There's a lot of hardship. There's a lot of tough conversations. I didn't want you guys to see that growing up. Not necessarily saying it was bad, but it's just she didn't think that was something that like the children should see versus, and I think of the same concept with like the leaders. And I think there is a interesting, I say dance. I don't like to use the word balance. I think of it more of a dance that leaders do have to have between you need to see more than I would want you to see
Mhm.
versus like, no, you really just don't need to know this kind of information of what happens on the back end side. Do you see people struggle a lot from both ends of, hey, I want to know what the leader is really doing because I feel like that like our leaders or our bosses don't really do much, and
Yes.
the bosses being okay with like showing like, hey, this is what we do. Like for example, I was able to see my CEO's schedule and he was perfectly fine with that. And he was just like, this is everything I'm doing. I was just like, okay, he does a lot more than I than I thought he was doing. And then like some of the stuff isn't even on the calendar. Like this is just high level, I guess, information. And I'm just like, so yeah. So do you think that ability or vulnerability of transparency hinders or aids um to the ultimate I would say organization?
So transparency always wins.
Hmm.
I think what happens a lot of times is not that this stuff is intentional. Like, I've never worked with a leader who's like, I'm going to hide stuff from my team.
Yeah.
What I see a lot of is I'm so freaking busy. I
Mhm.
don't necessarily have time to share. Like, I went to 7 meetings today. I don't necessarily have
Yeah.
the time to get my team together and be like, let me tell you what I did all day. So it's not intentional. But I think to your point, there are things that can be done. So I worked with a client that there was a lot of strife between their senior leadership team and their mid-level managers.
Mhm.
And what the senior team said was, come to our executive meetings. We will absolutely invite you. You can know everything that's going on. There's going to be some things we ask you not to share,
Yeah, of course.
or at least right away, but come and see what's actually happening. Because there was this idea of like, oh, they're behind closed doors and what are they really doing? And they're just, BSing or, having these long lunches or whatever. They're like, no, come to our meetings. And
Yeah.
that made a huge difference. And it was interesting. A couple months later, I talked to some of those people at the mid level, and they're like, "Yeah, we don't go to those anymore. We figured out what they're all about.
Yeah, we're good.
We're good."
I got the picture. No worry. I like that. Yeah, there's funny enough. There was another organization that that I was a part of, and they would have those monthly meetings where the CEO would just come in and like everybody would just talk. But even at the higher level, for all like the C-suite, I guess if that's the term you want to use, is everybody could see on the board what people were necessarily working on. So you never felt that like, hey, you were doing more necessary than the other, even though each role or each department has their own volume of work right. Is so then that's the conversation of like, I'm doing more than you. Yeah, but the work I'm doing is more impactful. So it may not seem in the volume standpoint it matters, but the lever when this is pulled, it's going to make your life a lot easier. So there's more work, right? Now, I want to pull back a bit, and I'm happy that we jumped in with a lot of just like rapid questions and insights. I know some people are probably thinking, like, okay, who is Brandy? Who is this person? She's talking about a lot of experience, and you have nearly 20 years of experience coaching leaders and teams. No, sorry,
Started
sorry,
when I
sorry.
was 10.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, exactly. Hey, funny enough, as a side tangent, I always tell people, I'm like, you can gain insights from anyone. It doesn't matter if it's a 3-year-old to a 30-year-old to a 90-year-old. I'm like, I will listen to anyone who has something to say because even if it's not particularly, I won't say accurate, it should allow you the opportunity to question and think of it and be like, how could, like, I love learning information from other people's industries doing a podcast and talking to so many people in industries because I'm like, this doesn't apply directly to what I'm doing or what this industry is, but what can I gain from this? How can I like deconstruct this concept and then apply some of the strategies to here, which I found to be most a lot effective. So help us to understand a little bit more, right? I mean, you're the founder, the CEO of the Pathfinder Strategies. How do we come about? How did you decide to come into this passion of leadership ultimately?
So I always have to think about how to talk about this concisely. So I was very fortunate that early in my career. I worked for this just wonderful company, exceptional leadership, and because it was like my first corporate gig,
Oh,
I
you
thought
got
this
spoiled.
was yeah, I thought this was normal, right? Great leadership, great culture. I loved going to work every day. Unfortunately, this was in the mortgage industry and this was right before the bubble.
Yeah.
So when that happened, I was like, okay, of course I'm out of a job. I got to kind of pick up the pieces. I'm like, well, I got exposed to a lot of different things in that industry. And I was like, I really liked working with the sales staff. I really liked training. So I'm just going to go be a corporate trainer. And that's how I ended up working for the school district. I was the support staff development coordinator. So this is where I this is a ridiculous title, but this is where I started to really my teeth in terms of like leadership development and programming and coaching and that kind of stuff. But what I struggled with, the position itself was great. What I struggled with was the leadership, and I struggled with the culture. And I began to see like that mortgage lending company, they were the eighth largest privately held mortgage company in the country.
Makes
So
sense.
that was like the fruit of the labor of like effective leaders and a
Right.
healthy culture. Then I went to work for this school district. And to give you an idea of the culture, Jay, when you would ask people, like I worked in the HR office, when people would come in and we would like, hey, how's it going? How's your day? Oh, only 3,091 more days till retirement. Like, wow.
Oh,
So that's how people felt about being at work. And then just the ability to get anything done was so hard. And, you could look and see that people were not fulfilled. They weren't happy in their work. And so that's when I kind of started to put some of these pieces together. And then I
mhm.
went and worked for an employee assistance provider for a while. And if you're not familiar with what they do, it's essentially a benefit employers can give to their teams, and it's like workplace counseling, right? So if you've got a
Okay.
manager that's struggling, you can refer them and they get some coaching. And so that's really where I started doing my coaching work, and I was building out more leadership development programs, and it was really, really great. And so I kind of looked at this breadth of experience and I was like, I think I can. First of all, I don't think this stuff is super like complicated. It's not easy, but it's not super complicated. And I think I could have a greater impact and
Mm,
touch more people by being on my own. So
okay.
that's when I started Pathfinder Strategies, and that was 12 years ago. Yeah.
That is, first of all, congratulations on even taking
Yeah.
that leap of faith. So if nobody's giving you your flowers yet, I'm going to give you your flowers while you're here today because it is very important. I think everyone to a degree should be able to take on a leadership role. And that doesn't mean necessarily you have to strive to be the top leader, the CEO, or, the manager. But in the sense of being able to embody what a leader is, because you're always involved with people, whether it's within work, it's in friendships, it's in relationships. So if everyone understood at least the principles of what it means in leading yourself, ultimately,
Yeah.
I mean, if we would just strip it back to that, it's like,
Yeah.
hey, understand what leadership is so you can best lead yourself to whatever it is that you want to do.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah.
Now, you've worked in multiple industries and like across industries. Why do you feel like most people struggle when it goes to taking that leadership role?
A lot of it, Jay, is stuff that we've kind of hit on. I
Hmm.
think there's a lack of preparation and understanding about what that role really truly is beyond the, oh, I get an office and I get a cool
Yeah,
title and cool business cards. And so I think that's part of it. And it's also that old cliche of what got you here is not going to get you there, right? Like what made you successful as an individual contributor. And probably the things that got you promoted are not the things that are going to make you successful in this role.
that's
It's a whole different
interesting.
ballgame. And that is very challenging because it's almost like you almost have to change identities a little bit. It's more than just a skill set. It's also the way that people perceive you. It's how you perceive yourself.
Yeah.
in addition to those skills. And you talked about people. The more you advance in your career, especially if you're on an upward trajectory into leadership, the more those relationships are important. And if
Mhm.
you've been successful because you're a technical expert, it's a significant change. So I think all of those are challenges, and then not getting the support necessarily, or not even, there's this sense of, okay, well, I'm in this position, I've got manager, leader, supervisor, whatever in my title, I should know the thing.
Mm.
So I'm not going to seek out that support or ask the question or in any way show my weakness. So I'm just going to suffer through in silence and just try and figure it out. And meanwhile, we're all looking at that person like, no, we know you don't know what you're doing. And we wish you would ask for help. And we wish you would get and we wish, and that's kind of where that self-awareness piece comes in as well.
That's it's interesting. I mean, I'm definitely that way. I don't know if that's a good or necessarily bad thing. I grew up as a military brat, and like one of the, I don't know if this has hindered me more than it's aided me. I want to say it's aided me more than it's hindered me. But I remember growing up. I think it was my dad. It was my dad or my mom. They were like, "If no one was here, what would your answer be, or what would you do?" And from that, it's given me the ability to just try to figure things out without having to ask. But I think there's also a caveat to where it's because of that, I'm not going to want to ask questions and just try to figure it out too. And I think it goes back to that conversation that you mentioned as far as like setting the expectations as a leader who's now helped develop slash uproad that leader. But my question to you is these people who are now promoting new leaders, not having the proper guidance or roadmap to even know what that now looks like for that new leader. They're just like they're just getting them to that level because one, it needs to be filled, and or two, they just see there's some promise there. But it's like, hey, you're gonna put me in this place without even guidance and or instructions now, like what? So like that now causes them to have this not FOMO, this regret or kind of remorse of even being in the role.
Yeah.
Like, do a lot of leaders promote people without the proper guidance or even infrastructure for these people to still continuously learn? It's like, nope, you're here, figure it out. This is the reason why I put you in this role. So they're like trying to solve a problem that they just don't want to solve themselves. So they put somebody else in that position to then solve it.
So I call this the warm body syndrome, where there's a business need and there's a warm body. So let's just
Mm,
throw that warm body into this business need and hope for the best. And I have rarely seen that work out successfully. Or I've seen it work out successfully over many like months or years, right?
yeah.
So it is a very painful way to start. And this is what if I could like boil things down to the simplest level, just freaking talk to each other. Just right.
Yeah.
Um, it's okay to be the one to ask questions. If you've just been promoted and you have no structure, and you're like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, ask the question.
Hmm.
If you're the leader who just promoted this person to a management position and there is no structure in place, before that promotion, create one or do the best you can to coach and support. Check in on them. I mean, like, this doesn't have to be hard.
Hmm.
It doesn't have to be like, oh, I have to make all this time. It can be as simple as me picking up the phone and calling and say, hey, Jay, are you drowning? Are you okay? What are you working on? How can I support you? Those kinds of things. So if there's no structure in place, just do something and keep those lines of communication open, because that is such a quick trip to burnout, what you've just described. And when someone's burned out, they're not going to perform at their best. They're not going to be a good role model for the team they're leading. And ultimately, they're probably not going to stay with the company.
Yeah. It's interesting that you said that because I feel that people who do end up getting to that point, if they get to that point too often, it not necessarily traumatizes them, but if they didn't get back on their feet, like they've been burnt out and now they're back, they're like, okay, cool, let me give this another shot. And they're getting back to that point or that feeling of like uncomfortableness and like turbulence. It's like they repeat a whole cycle. And it's like, again, back to leaders, like be willing to serve, have those continuous conversations. Like, is that with workshops? Is that with daily, weekly stand-ups? Or, what have you seen to be the best for leaders who are helping these new leaders to sustain this now position or growth? Is it just, I mean, I know you mentioned communication, but is that like hands-on? Is that just resources? Is that just a clearer roadmap or just the overall umbrella of things?
So I think it's helpful to have like some kind of plan or structure. All
Mhm.
right, so you've been promoted. You're gonna have a resource in HR, and HR is really gonna be like a person that you can go to for this, this, and this. You're gonna have a buddy, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's somebody in a different department who's sort of your peer,
Yeah.
right? That's a good go-to person for you.
Mhm.
We've got here's a book you can read. Maybe there's a coaching component, right? Like organizations, I have a lot of clients that they bring me in specifically at that moment of transition, right? So when people are having these sort of holy shit like experiences, they feel like they have someone that's safe, that's
Mhm.
not necessarily in the organization, that they can talk to. And I think there's a lot to be said for just get the support that you need, right? Like there is not one single leader, there's not one single person who just knows all the things. None of
Mhm.
us do. And we're all just trying to figure it out. And so if you can have that support network, whether it's internally, right, through those avenues that I mentioned, or even encouraging people like, hey, go get involved with this association or go to this networking event so that there's an opportunity to connect. I love what you said earlier about getting insights from other industries.
Mhm.
That kind of comes into play as well. So I don't know that there's like a perfect formula necessarily. I think a lot of it is like letting people know that it's okay. Like you are going to feel uncertain and you are going to feel anxious and you are going to make mistakes. We
Mhm.
all do it. And just like you have a safety net so long as you're being ethical and not like breaking, you have this safety net. You don't have to go at it alone. And let's talk about it. So just even having that sense of psychological safety and having some, a couple of great resources to point to, I think is a really good place to start.
I love that. Now I want to get into a little bit of like the hidden cost in these leadership gaps because I think there's two different sides. You have the hidden costs of you as the individual, as the person, not developing these skill sets and or getting, extending or ascending up. And then there's the hidden actual cost to the business itself, right? That will slow down the business, hurt morale, and like just undermine the culture. What kind of impacts have you seen for people and then also on the business side that's been like the hidden cost of not developing leaders or having these resources or pushing leadership on with people?
Oh my gosh, I have so many things to say.
Break it down. You got
Okay, so I think if I don't feel like my organization cares about me, and this is true for development as a whole, not even specific to leadership, but if I don't feel like my organization is somehow vested in my continued growth, whether that's a promotion or whether that's being the absolute best, administrative assistant that I can be, and taking those classes or shadowing someone or whatever, if that's not in place, then what you really want is a robot or a step through.
AI agents are here to come.
So there's that sort of like satisfaction piece.
Mhm.
That is huge. So that's one piece of it. And then when people don't feel like they're invested in, why would they stay? If you want me to come in and punch the clock, I can do that anywhere. I can do that at McDonald's. So and it's easier and less stressful. So why did they stay? Right. P.S. By the way, turnover is super expensive, and I have never seen it as a line item in a budget. This is
No.
hidden cost. This is a huge hidden cost. So there's all kinds of different data about this, but the Society of Human Resources Managers says that when someone leaves, especially someone sort of at that mid level, the cost to bring someone else in and get them up to speed is 2.5 times their annual salary. Like it's jaw dropping every time that I think about that. It's
Yeah.
crazy. So there's a huge like money component. Then there's also this like seamless continuation of operations. If people are not sort of upskilling and learning and they're not sort of staying on top of things, the innovation can dry up. And we end up doing this, we've always done it this way. And we end up doing the same things that we were doing 20 years ago, which
Mhm.
don't meet the business needs of today. Shoot, what was the third point I was gonna make? I totally lost it, but there you go. There's some good spots to start.
I like that. And I mean, I know it depends on the organization where they're going, what's needed. Would you say for the leaders that are listening that Invest into the people you already have first to ascend to there. Obviously, I know it depends on how important and like how crucial timing wise. So maybe the people that's in the organization, you can't ramp them up that quickly. But of course, would you say, hey, invest into the people you currently have first to see if you can ascend them eventually to that roadmap you have, or just, hey, plug in from an outside, I would say source, but an outside party to then come in and plug this role? Because I've seen sometimes where it's like, hey, I wanted to go for this role. And then somebody else comes in and step in, and then you're like, okay, well now there's that growth, that roadmap of leadership just isn't there anymore because it just got filled. I'm going to go somewhere else. Versus like, hey, maybe we can kind of create another leadership opportunity because we just needed to fill. And it's back to that communication. I think ultimately that's what we're getting at. But so ascend first within and then bring outside, or bring outside and work on ascending people. I know it's a dance.
I love internal growth.
Hmm.
And I love when people can experience it, and I love when they can see it, because I believe, and this is just my belief, that people don't want a job hop. Um,
It's become more popular though now. Interesting. But is that because of the lack of leadership slash opportunities, or is it just really people like the way culture or the way society or people are now? They get bored and then go.
yeah, so this is what I've seen. I've seen, okay, so I started in this new company. I got all these skills, I got all this stuff, but maybe there's no place for me to go. Or there's no
Mm,
place for me to go right now, but maybe there is in 2 years. So, well, why would I wait 2 years? Let me just put it out there and see if I can make that jump now. And then so, making that jump to a new company, plugging in, like you said, someone new, and then kind of that process repeats itself. Like, okay, now I'm at this level, I'm going to get the skills I need and experience, and then I'm going to do the same thing. So
mhm.
I think it's helpful for organizations to really focus on developing internally. And even when there's not a place to go at that moment, what other opportunities can you give people to sort of flex their leadership muscles?
Yeah.
So maybe that's like, hey, I'm the manager, but I can't go to all these meetings. Can you go in my place? Or I want to give you this project because I need to have this taken off my plate. Or I would love for you to represent us on this committee. Or, there's other opportunities. It doesn't always have to be like, okay, cool, we invested, in this leadership development program for you, and now you get a promotion. There's other things that can work as well. So, and I do think there sometimes is value in bringing in people from the outside for exactly what you mentioned earlier, especially if you're bringing in someone from a different industry or a different sort of breadth of experience. You get that other perspective, and that
Yeah.
is really helpful in terms of like innovation and challenging the status quo. So it's both and.
Okay, yeah, I figured so, and I think just the underlining tone, which will be the underlining tone of the whole conversation, is leaders. You have to care. Like you
Yeah.
don't just have to care about the people. You got to care about like the trajectory and just like you, the company, and the people, and care more about them than they do care about your business. Like it's your business, so care about where their future and who they are in their life, because they're not just there to. And I think that was the misconception. Maybe it was a thing back in the day, or maybe it never was a thing, and somehow this idea just came about where it's like, yeah, people don't really care to develop a career or develop a purpose. They just want to work and make money. So I'm just getting people that like to just do the work. I don't care about what they really want to do. I just need bodies. I just need people to build my thing versus like, hey, I want to build people that want to then also build this thing.
Yes. Yeah. That you like nailed it. That's what it's about, right? Because the thing can't build itself. And if you're not investing, like people want to feel like they're part of something. What you described about the bodies, I've never had that experience, right? Like I've never seen that as somebody's philosophy,
Yeah.
because it doesn't work. The people are the ones who make the thing happen. So if you
Correct.
invest in the people, the things will happen, and they'll happen in magical ways.
I like that. Now you have I feel okay, let me backtrack. So maybe some people don't realize or understand that it's needed for them to then develop. You have this Spark program, turning struggling leaders into confidence ones. Tell us a little bit about this Spark program. What is it? Who is it for as well?
Yeah, so the Spark program is really meant for people that are like brand new to leadership,
Hmm.
and it goes through a lot of what we talked about today. It goes through like first self leadership, right? You got to be able to lead yourself. We talk a lot about self awareness. We build out your leadership brand, and then we also talk about like okay, this is not a vacuum. So you have to understand what's expected of you from your organization, what's expected of you of your team. And then we move into building those relationships. So often I think in leadership programs, that's the piece that's missing. It's like, okay, well, here's how you delegate and here's how you run this administrative function and all that kind of stuff. But we miss that piece. And then we wonder why communication is so broken. So we spend a
Mhm.
lot of time talking about how do you build relationships. We go through some assessments and all kinds of stuff. And then we have like an honest dialogue. This is sort of the third part of the program. We have an honest dialogue about this is hard, right? And then we right? And then we talk about like, okay, how do you overcome those challenges? How do you, when you end this program, where do you get your support? How do you ask for it? Because I think sometimes we feel like, well, you're my hiring manager or you're my immediate supervisor. You should be the one. There's got to be some accountability on both sides of that equation.
Yeah.
So it's a great program. It's an open enrollment program, which is very powerful because that means there's people from different industries, there's people at different levels of leadership and different degrees of experience. And yes, there's a lot of really great content, but there's also this best practice sharing, and there's this sort of shared experience and this sense of safety that comes from being in a group like that. Like I can say whatever because I don't have to see you at the next manager meeting.
That is so true. And I'm gonna keep relating because I just can talk from personal experience. I've had people when I was in an organization, they're like, how are you so confident to then talk to like the CEO or these people this particular way? Because one, I've developed a relationship to hopefully be able to do so, but two, they're people, and if I want to best serve them, I need them to have insights and information of not just how I feel, but what's going on. I'm like, there's always a way that you can articulate information and bring it, but I'm like, it always comes to the place of have you created an open space for this to be okay. Now, I feel to a degree I have a superpower where I've been able to flex that type of muscle. And
Yep.
I know you talk about people being able to identify this superpower in their leadership. How can someone identify that superpower that they can lean on in like those leadership roles and embracing it?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So there's an exercise that we walk people through, that I walk people through, and it starts with asking people to identify their strengths. And it's such a basic question, right? And here's the funny thing, Jay. In all my years of doing this, when I ask that question, it's so often the case that it's like silent, like crickets. People
Hmm.
don't know how to respond. And what they'll usually say to me is, well, I don't know about that, but I'm working on the laundry list of things. Like, no, no, no. We need to get to the not the stuff you think you should have or do or be, but what is actually true for you. And so I have people think about what consistently comes up in your performance reviews as being like, your kudos kind of stuff. What
Hmm.
do people come to you on for advice? What are people always asking you to help them with? What are your customers, clients, whether it's internal or external, what are they always complimenting you on? So those are some places to really to look. And then you can ask the question to the people that you work with. Also take an assessment, take the strengths finder. We use the disc assessment, which is fabulous and it helps sort of point some of those things out. So that's kind of the first question. And then the second question is, okay, so if you had to pick one adjective that described your leadership, what is that adjective? And then what are the values that support that? Not thinking about anything else, right? Thinking about yourself. And then what are the behaviors that you're showing every day that support those values, right? So if you say to me, I value different perspectives, awesome. What are you doing? Like, how do I know
Yes.
that just by looking at you, just by talking to you? And those questions, those exercises are so helpful in bringing clarity. So I'm a big believer that there is no such thing as like this template for the perfect leader. There's a much stronger philosophy, which is build around the strengths that you have and manage your weaknesses. And you do that through recognizing other people's strengths
Mhm.
and finding ways to leverage and complement those.
I love that. And it's interesting because I remember seeing a post on social media where and it made me really reflect on myself. It's like you can never, you're not, if you're always looking towards the next best thing, you can't appreciate already the accomplishments you've done,
Yes.
right? So I think to tie that into this conversation is some people, and we live in such a, I'm guilty of this because I'm a part of this movement or industry of self-development and becoming better. It's like, can you appreciate and be able to identify who you are and what you've been able to do as this leader of these superpowers when you're constantly trying to improve on to the next one? It's like, oh yeah, maybe I'm good at, communication, but I'm trying to work on this, like what you mentioned. So how can people not necessarily stop, but freeze time to be able to identify this? Because I feel like there's a part where if I ask you, hey Brandy, from the conversation we have so far, what do you feel like my leadership, or I didn't say leadership, what am I good at? Some people aren't willing to have, even if it's a compliment and good advice, willing to even receive that because they're so fixated on developing.
Yeah. I would say there's a really good opportunity for reflection.
Mhm.
There's like when we're so focused on developing, we're really focused on what I don't have, right? And
Yes.
guess what? There's always going to be something that you don't have. Whether it's a skill set, whether there that's just how it is. So that's the piece I think, Jay, that is often missing is I meet some pretty badass people and they don't recognize it as such, or they don't recognize the specific things that I'll give you a quick example. I used to get called into meetings all the time. And I actually, this was true when I served on boards. This was true in my corporate life. I would get called into meetings that had nothing to do with me and nothing to do with my job function. And I'd walk in and they'd spew everything that was going on. And then I'd be like, here's your one sentence issue that you need to be focused on. See you later.
Yeah.
It never occurred to me that that was a strength until I sat down. Well, I had somebody point this out to me, but then I'm like, I really need to reflect more on this because if I'm not self-aware and I don't know what my strengths are, that means I'm not operating at my highest potential. And I'm not modeling for my team how to operate at their highest potential.
So consistent self-auditing,
Yes.
reflections, and I mean that can be in a multitude of ways, from just journaling, having conversations, asking for insights from
Yes.
other people, utilizing different tools and resources that are out there. For sure, for people that's looking and inspiring to go into leadership for 2025, is it getting a coach? Is it just learning material about leadership? What would be that first step if people are like, hey, I want to make sure I go into a leadership role, I just want to make sure I have the best position to go
Yeah.
there? What would be that first step for people?
The first step I would recommend is answering the question why. Why is
Ooh.
that? Why is that a role that you want? Why is that a road that you want to travel? And answering it honestly, because I'll tell you, Jay, if somebody would have asked me that question when I was, very early in my career, I would have answered honestly by saying, I want to make more money and I want a title. And
Correct.
there's nothing wrong with that. However, that's not what leadership is about. So I think that would be the place that I would start is getting really honest with yourself and really clear
Hmm.
on why that's important and then working from there.
Yeah, it's funny that you said that because I remember being in the sales role as like a closer before moving up to a manager and director. I was just like, I had to reflect on that because I was like, technically, in a way, I'm making more money than the manager, and I have more freedom and flexibility than the manager. So why would I want to then go into something not necessarily that would be, I would take a pay cut because you get incentivized in different ways too. But now I'm taking on so much more risk, so much more responsibility. Like, what is the innate nature in me that is like interested and attracted to that? Is it an ego thing? Is it a pride? Is it more of like, hey, I just want to see what I'm capable of? And for some people, they're like, yeah, no, if I could just make more money, is there a way I can make more money? Because that's ultimately what I want from the management role. How can I do that? Is it within this particular company? Is it jumping to a different company that just pays more? Maybe it's doing something else on the side that I can just bring in revenue. I think that is true. But I feel like some people just they're not able, not that they're not able to answer the question or ask the question to themselves, but some people might not be able to guide themselves through that question. Correct. I
So
don't say correctly, but yeah.
yeah, so I think that's really a good opportunity. That's where a coach could really be helpful.
Okay.
because a coach, I mean, that's what coaches do, right? Is
Yeah.
we get a little bit deeper and what's really underneath that. One thing too, Jay, I want to comment on with what you just said. I think largely we're conditioned as a society, right?
Hmm.
I think we're largely conditioned to desire this upward trajectory
Yeah.
for what, even for whatever reason, whether it's monetary or I want to make my mom proud or I want the clout that comes along with having, such and such title on my name on a business card. We're conditioned for that. And the truth is that doesn't have to be the only path. And it
Hmm.
doesn't have to be the only path for growth. There are other things that you can do. I mean, you mentioned, is there another company that I can go to? Is there something else I can be doing to make more money? If that's the thing that's important to me. For organizations, is there another track? Is there a technical track versus a people management track? There's other opportunities. It doesn't just have to be this very, up and down kind of
Yeah.
movement. There's other ways to go about it.
I like that. Now, you have a phenomenal business you've been running for a very long time. Help us explain a little bit about what it is that you guys do at the Pathfinder Strategies. And we talked about leadership and all these different tools you've sprinkled, your experience, but help us understand specifically what it is that you guys do and how people can get involved with it as well.
Yeah. So at our core, we help leaders feel more confident so that they can be more effective in their role and be more effective managing their teams. Like that, everything we do rolls up to that. So we have some specific programs. You mentioned Spark. We also have Ignite, which is more of a team focused program. So it's kind of like, Spark 2.0, right? That's the leaders, what they learn for themselves. And then how do I then actually use this with my team? We also coaching, of course, one-to-one coaching. We offer workshops. That's really a great way if there's sort of like a shot in the arm thing that an organization or a leader is looking for, or they're sort of supplementing their existing leadership development. That's a big part of what we do. We also offer VIP days, which is really great if you're like, we saw this a lot last year, people coming back to the office who never met, right? They never met because they worked together during COVID. So they're like, how the heck do we work together as a team? And how do we sort of get over that awkward hump, right? So we do a lot of VIP days, and then we have custom programming. So if there's a larger organizational need, for example, we worked with a company recently, their entire leadership team shifted in the course of like 3 months. So we're talking like 16 people. So some people retired, people were promoted, people moved positions, other people were on their way out. Like it was a lot and it was all at one time. So, which I would not recommend.
Yeah, I'm about to say, I don't think I would recommend this doing.
So there's a lot of uncertainty. There was a lot of like basic foundational questions. Who are we? Where are we going? What's our culture? What do we want the next 5 years to look like? Really important foundational things. So we did a program with them where we did some on-site work. And then we had an online component as well. So that was a 6-month project because obviously it was much bigger in nature. So we offer things like that as well.
And yeah, I definitely would not recommend doing that big of a shit. That's awesome. So guys, if you're listening, you're hearing this or watching this, that sounds like something you need or are interested in. You can see, and I think sometimes too, incorporating these tools and getting ahead of it before it becomes an issue is a big thing people don't talk about. Is let's look into the future leadership development, even though we don't have anything current right now. But I know as we grow and we're building and we're like getting new people on, it will be a thing.
I love this question because so much of our work is reactive as opposed to
Yeah.
proactive. And I think there's kind of a few pieces here. If culture is important to you, leadership development has to be important to you because who's going to execute your culture? Who's going to support your culture? It's your leaders.
Correct.
So those two things have to go. So even if there's not like, Brady, we don't have any openings right now, or all of our slots are filled, or we're this little bitty company, or it's just me looking for coaching for myself, but I don't really know where this is going. Like, this is always going to be important stuff. Leadership development is personal development, and vice versa. Yeah. So even if you're an individual that's listening, these are skills that are going to make you more marketable. These are skills that you're actually going to be able to tap regardless of where you are in your career or what you're doing. Now, from an organizational perspective, these are questions that are going to be asked to you. Well, what's your leadership development program look like? What's your succession plan? What's my opportunity for growth and development as staying a part of this company. Again, kind of, I mean, we talked a little bit about this earlier, but even if there's not a specific position to be filled, or there's not like, hey, we've done our strategy and we don't have a lot of like growth in our strategy, people still want to continue to be better, effective for themselves, for their team. So it's never a bad investment. And I'll also say, it doesn't have to be like a $600,000 project. Like, leadership development is something as simple as, you're my manager and we have one-on-ones once a week, and you're giving me feedback and I'm giving you feedback, and or I'm looking at your behavior and you're modeling this behavior, and we're talking about like what great leadership means in our company and how it relates to our culture and hitting our goals. Like, that's part of the development process as well. So I just want to say that to everyone. It's not, you don't have to, yes, it's helpful to bring in a consultant because sometimes they help pull the pieces together.
Right.
But there's stuff that you could be doing right now, today, and every day to support what those goals are.
That's so much. And where can people find you? Where would be the best way to connect with you, learn more information about what you guys are specifically doing?
Yep.
Help the listeners be able to find this.
Yeah, absolutely. You can absolutely find me on LinkedIn. Just my name, Brandy Ferrer. And then our website, Pathfinder Strategies, is pathfinder-strategies.com. And I'm going to do a quick little shameless plug for my book, Spark: How Great Leaders Start. So you can find that on Amazon. And that really mirrors a lot of our Spark program. So if you're like, a lot of this is resonating with you, but you're like, we don't have the budget, or I'm not really sure, check out the book, because that'll give you some insight, and it's full of really good tools and stuff as well.
Now, Brandy, we talked about a lot of different gems. You provide a lot of great information and knowledge, and thank you so much for sharing your experience. Our business is called Info Profit. So the whole concept is, all you need is like a piece of information, some form of insight to get the gears running so that you can be profitable, not just in your business, but just in life.
There is no such thing as a perfect leader, and you can use your strengths right now to propel yourself to wherever you want to go. You are the best leader that you can be. There you go. That's my 2 cents.
I love it. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching. Again, click the links down below to be able to connect with Brandy a lot more and learn more what they're doing specifically. If you are a leader who wants to better, be a leader, or if you're a person that's looking into becoming a leader, and just in general, you feel like your team needs something to shake and bake for what you guys are doing, click the link, connect. Until next time, peace.
Thanks, Jay.